When John Oliver makes a segment about homeschooling, you'd assume he'd be totally against it. But he's only against it when certain people do it. Here are a few reasons for homeschooling John Oliver thinks are okay. For instance, say you wanted to teach your kids the alphabet like this.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
That is clearly excellent.
Or you could leave state schools to escape mockery.
At 15, Victoria asked her mom, Bernita, to take her out of Detroit schools. She says she was being bullied relentlessly for her appearance.
That's great. That is very nice.
This reason really resonates with Oliver, whose looks can only be described as malnourished parrot. And here's another John Oliver-approved reason for homeschool.
And there's also a growing number of black parents opting to homeschool due to whitewashed curriculums and zero-tolerance policies in schools that disproportionately criminalize their kids at an early age.
Yes, for years, liberals have berated nerdy conservative Christians for homeschooling because they aren't qualified, like a real teacher. But when black people do it, it's amazing and necessary. They escape discrimination and get a head pat from John Oliver. But what are some reasons that John Oliver doesn't find compelling?
Take this man who offers this pretty shaky rationalization for pulling his kid out of school.
I think the type of content on what they're teaching about sex or anal sex, that my third grade daughter should not be in a classroom where a teacher or someone else is teaching her about that.
Yeah, this guy even looks like one of those non-approved homeschoolers. Oh, I suppose you think kids should learn about sex from their parents? What do parents know about sex? Maybe I just detect a little beard envy. Here's Oliver's reflection on this guy not wanting his kids to learn about butt sex in the third grade.
Well, that sounds like total bullshit. Although I guess I do basically agree with him there. Things that are definitely not happening should continue not to happen.
But remember the freak out about Florida's sex ed law? The one that banned inappropriate sex talk until the kids hit third grade? Here's what John Oliver had to say about that.
It's not about sex at all. It's about denying the existence of gay people.
Of course gay people exist. Someone's watching John Oliver's show. It's a perfect example of that's not happening and it's good that it is. And remember, Libs of TikTok basically makes a living tweeting anal sex guides for preschoolers. Not in an approving way. So what might be some of John Oliver's problems with homeschooling?
There is no oversight and no evaluation by anyone of the academic program and of students' progress.
Yes, the progress of homeschoolers isn't monitored by the state. Therefore, everyone should go to a public school, preferably one supplemented with money from a famous basketball player.
So for 3 years, not one child passed the state test in math, not one for 3 years.
It is discouraging.
Or maybe they should go to school in the greatest city in the world.
In New York City, the numbers are much worse, with more than half of 3rd through 8th graders not proficient.
Maybe that song was needed more than I thought.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
But that's nothing compared to the scary things homeschoolers are learning.
One current Abeka history book says that the beginning of the 20th century witnessed a cultural breakdown that threatened to destroy the very roots of Western civilization. The cause of this dissolution was an idea or philosophy known as liberalism. A workbook from ACE celebrates the Confederate General Robert E. Lee as a devoted Christian, and a science book from Bob Jones University claims that biblical and scientific evidence tends to support the idea that men and dinosaurs existed at the same time.
They're talking about something other than slavery and the Holocaust. Run! This is Oliver's classic fallacy of argument by appeal to audience laughter, where he just states things that are true in a put-upon voice so that the audience laughs at how ridiculous they are. Speaking of fallacies, here we have the argument by TikTok.
Just watch as this former homeschool student breaks down her daily schedule.
First, we've got classical music, which was just turning on classical music in the morning so that everyone could hear it. We've got Bible listening. We've got handwriting and math. That's fairly normal. We've got memorizing the Bible. We've got memorizing poetry. The poetry was mostly hymns.
Yeah, imagine learning poetry from this schlub. And here's another cherry-picked example.
Even that is a preferable alternative to the single worst homeschool curriculum that we found.
We are so deeply invested into making sure that that child becomes a wonderful Nazi. And by homeschooling, we're going to get that done.
He's found an obscure Nazi homeschooler. That proves something. That homeschooling group has just over 100 members on Gab, and I assume most of them are John Oliver researchers. But the basic structure here is an argument from silence. They aren't required to report, so they must be doing something bad. And then he uses one TikTok and 10 seconds from a podcast to support that inference. Leaps of logic he could learn to avoid if only he were homeschooled. And if you were looking at stats, homeschooled kids outperform public schoolers in almost every respect, including academics. I'd tell you to read this article later, but that might be too close to homeschooling. But if you get too many homeschoolers, they might start advocating for their interests. He then shows a clip from a homeschool lobby lawyer in 2004.
I can't wait for the day when our young people vanquish the enemy by a 5-4 vote reversing Roe versus Wade, where we vanquish the specter of same-sex marriage. That's the standard of victory.
Okay, there is a lot that is hard to take.
John Oliver is appalled at the way normal people talk. He thinks he's David Attenborough explaining the weird ways of some rare species. Here we have the Christian conservative, and he seems to be trying to speak. And here's another John Oliver-approved homeschool mom.
Whenever there's a threat in any particular state to their right to homeschool, oh, you will see us come together.
He creates this scenario where homeschooling is the most unregulated thing in the country, but at the same time, homeschoolers are so in danger from the government, they feel they have no choice but to register with the HSLDA. Which is it, Mr. Bean?
The people that you have to work with in order to maintain what you hold dear are also the people who crush you.
Stop helping me with my legal bills. You're crushing me with money. And then if he weren't reaching enough, he makes the case that homeschoolers are trying to hide child abuse.
Teachers and school administrators are mandated reporters. So, if a child comes to school with bruises or emaciated, that is a very common way that it gets reported.
Right, because the fact is teachers serve multiple functions at school in addition to education. They watch out for signs of abuse, they chaperone school events. Teachers are superheroes who should make $1 million a year.
Ah, yes, teachers are superheroes that should make $1 million a year, but parents who do the job for free are, by default, abusers. But again, let's go to the stats. In this 2022 review, the authors found that homeschooling versus public schooling was a non-issue in regards to abuse and neglect. In fact, they cite a 2017 study that found legally homeschooled students are 40% less likely to die by child abuse or neglect than the average student nationally. And why not look at the reports of abuse by school employees? But John Oliver doesn't care about any of that.
I understand that involving social services and the government in people's personal situations poses a risk, especially to those who aren't wealthy and who aren't white. But it does seem like giving parents a get-out-of-all-scrutiny-free, no-questions-asked card just isn't the answer here.
This is similar to Oliver's take on the NRA. It's all, look, more government regulation is good, and if you're a good person, you don't have anything to worry about. The government loves you and just wants what's best. And when he ends by saying that more regulation wouldn't hurt parents doing a good job homeschooling, it ignores the history of persecution homeschoolers have faced. A friend of mine worked for a homeschool umbrella, and they had certain areas where CPS was just out to get homeschoolers because they were enraged that every homeschooled student meant less government funding for local schools. So they'd target parents, even take their kids away without just cause, and put them in the foster system. Yes, they put them in the foster system to save them from abuse. It's like sending kids to Willy Wonka's factory to save them from chocolate rivers. These parents eventually got their kids back, but CPS workers can basically play God if they have an agenda and no scruples. Oliver assumes that more regulation would improve outcomes. He hasn't even proven the outcomes are bad, but he doesn't let that trouble him. He also loves to critique things while acting as if their alternative is above reproach. It'd be like if he did a segment on diet and exercise. Look at this anorexic lady, and this guy who's practically made of trenbolone. People have even died from diet and exercise. And he's proven it. Diet and exercise are bad. They'd be much better off with the typical American diet. But citing problems with something doesn't validate the alternative. I admit I don't have a dog in this fight. My son goes to a great Christian school, but I might pull him out and just start homeschooling just to aggravate John Oliver. But Oliver's segment may have parents wondering what to do if they want to homeschool. That's why he's released John Oliver's Homeschool Curriculum for White Christians. It includes books such as The Blessings of Liberty by David French. It's the story of Liberty, a beautiful drag queen who goes from library to library trying to find a place to read to children. It's like the Pied Piper, but fabulous. The curriculum also includes V for Vaccine by Russell Moore and Blood is My Food by Bill Kristol. What do you think, John?
That is clearly excellent.